Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. Let's kick things off with a story about an ER visit that took a wild turn when a full-blown Karen stormed in. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. You can't fix stupid, but you can call security. I was at the local ER Tuesday and saw my first Karen in the wild. It was nearly midnight, and I'd been there since around 5 p.m., so to say I was tired and hurting would be an understatement. They were getting ready to release me when your typical Karen walks in, marches up to the nurse's station where you check in. Everything's quiet at first, so I wasn't really paying that much attention until voices got loud. Apparently the woman wanted to see or visit someone in the ER exam area where the hospital bed area is. They were not allowed back for some reason, and boy, did it get ugly then. The woman insisted that her friend/relative was back there and she was going to see them. The staff informed the woman politely that she could not go back and was told previously that she couldn't. Following is the conversation as I heard it. CW equals crazy woman, NS equals nice staff, cop equals duh. CW, I will go see them right now. NS, no ma'am you won't. We've explained this to you twice before. There are no visitors allowed at this time. CW, you will let me back there now. It's my right to see them. NS, no ma'am it isn't. You are not allowed in the exam area. CW, I need to make sure they're all right. You can't keep me from seeing them, you idiots. How am I supposed to know if they're okay? NS, ma'am, can you please stop yelling? There are sick people here and you're disturbing them. This is when the cop walks through a side door that the woman can't see at her angle. He nonchalantly leans in the doorway out of her view. CW, I don't give a crap about these other losers. I want to see person's name right now. What room are they in? NS, ma'am, I'm not going to tell you again to calm down and lower your voice. You're not allowed to see the patient at this time. I will call security if needed. CW, call them. I don't care. You can't keep me from seeing them. I know my rights. This is when the cop starts slowly walking towards the nurse's station. The CW's phone rings and she walks a few feet behind me and answers your phone. CW, no, they won't let me see person's name. No, they won't tell me what's wrong. Long pause. No, I won't. Shorter pause. Oh, I'll see about that. She's quiet for a few moments, then marches back to the nurse's station. While she was on her call, the cop walked up to the station and is leaning on the desk. The CW sees the cop and pauses, then walks the rest of the way back. NS, ma'am, you need to leave now. We've told you 3 times now that you're not allowed to visit the patient at this time. And you've disturbed this waiting area for the last time tonight. You have a good night now. CW, I'll have all your jobs for this, you a-holes. She storms out, and a few minutes later, I overheard the staff talking to the cop. NS, if she wants my job so bad, she can have it. Then I wouldn't have to put up with people like her. Cop, what was her problem anyway? He chuckles. NS, the patient didn't want her back there. He smiles at the cop. The patient said she was a B and didn't want her in their room for any reason. Made a long ER visit interesting, in a good way for once. I've noticed a fairly common misconception that being in a hospital means you're in a public location. But most hospitals are either government-owned, controlled locations, or privately owned. And either way, you generally don't carry out your public commons rights into the hospital with you. Not to mention, patient privacy and comfort usually takes precedent over the will of a non-client patient. And our second story. The day I was mistaken for management again. Context. My wife is the assistant front-end department manager for a grocery chain. She doesn't drive, and her store is less than 2 miles from our home in a rural community. Everyone in town knows her and loves her. She's a complete sweetheart to everyone she meets. By extension, I'm well known in the store by the employees and am genuine friends with several of them. As a result, it's common to see me talking to the associates on a regular basis. Their uniforms are usually jeans or khakis with a white shirt that has the company logo. Managers wear a green or black polo embroidered with the logo. I work from home as an IT administrator. My usual attire is usually very similar. I like to wear colored cargo pants and either a t-shirt or collared button-down shirts, mostly blue or black. I'm often confused for store management due to my frequency in the store, talking to associates, the way I dress, and my knack for customer service. I normally just bring the person to the nearest actual manager and apologize for the mix-up. On this day, however, there came a cretin creepin', a glibly gallivanting sort. This day I was wearing green cargo pants and a blue t-shirt. There really wasn't a good excuse this day, but the question was nevertheless posed from the man on the mark case. Can you tell me where X item is? Obviously I could. I know this store really well at this point, as I love to cook and I know where to find all the best stuff. However, I politely inform him that the grocery manager is only one aisle over stocking the freezer. Then came the very odd interaction that made today stand out among all my conversations. The man accused me of lying to him, then proceeded to ask me to buy his groceries for him. Now, I'm sure you, my dear reader, at this very moment forming an assumption that I have left a detail, some morsel out somewhere. I assure you I have not. His exact statement, to the very best of my fresh memory, was, "I don't think that's true. I know you work here, and if you work here, you have to help me. I can't afford my groceries, and I was hoping you could buy them for me." The very thought sent me reeling around. That's when I laid eyes on him. I knew. Well, I knew him in the same way he knew me. I'd seen him around the store. Specifically, I'd seen him in the pictures my wife took of him to get him banned. This man was very infamous in the community for faking injuries, faking disabilities, illnesses, the works. He refuses to work, instead asking everyone and anyone to buy things for him. He was kicked out of the pizzeria across the lot for it. He's been banned from 2 different pharmacies over it. I looked in his basket. It was full of junk, Atkins drinks, chips, soda, snack cakes, fruit chews, several other miscellaneous items of dubious quality. I turned up my lip and narrowed my eyes to him. I said, "So you went and filled your cart with stuff you can't afford to harp on anyone in a 20-yard radius with a sob story?" He got offended, and with some back and forth, he suddenly took it upon himself to take my advice. He miraculously stood up and off his marked cart and walked as pretty as you please over to the next aisle, raising the grocery manager. Some yelling and profanity later, the manager stepped around the corner, took one look at me, and sighed deeply. Upon being told I don't work there, he departed rather swiftly, leaving the clearly crammed, full marked cart there in the middle of the aisle. Interesting that embarrassment miraculously healed his ability to walk. If you knew he was supposed to be banned from the store, then you should have just called the cops on the scam artist and not wasted your time with someone who's a complete waste of space. And our last story. How my brother reclaimed his life and home. Dan, my brother, built his dream home years ago in a peaceful Washington neighborhood with an HOA. Life threw curveballs, and during the 2008 economic crash, he fell on hard times. To repay us for our financial help, he came to California to help renovate our house. While Dan was away, his friend Jake reached out asking if a friend, Tuna, could temporarily rent a room in Dan's house for $400 a month. Desperate for extra income and trusting Jake's judgment, Dan agreed. Dan returned to Washington to prepare the room, locked up his belongings, and welcomed Tuna, expecting it to be a short-term arrangement. But Tuna never paid another cent after the first month. Calls and reminders went ignored or met with lies. Then a neighbor revealed that Dan's house had turned into a trash with strange people coming and going at all hours. The nightmare began. Dan returned to Washington in mid-2011, served Tuna with a 3-day eviction notice, and was relieved when she left voluntarily, or so he thought. She promised to retrieve her belongings later, but days later she returned with 2 men who assaulted Dan and tried to take the house by force. Dan fled to a neighbor's home and called the police, expecting justice. Instead, they arrested him for an old, unnoticed warrant tied to missed child support payments. Tuna used the opportunity to reclaim the house, changing the locks, barricading the garage door, and effectively stealing Dan's home. Despite clear evidence of squatting, the police repeatedly sided with Tuna, refusing to move her without a court order. They took her word that she was a tenant, even after seeing the eviction notice. Dan was banned from his own property, left to live in his van while trying to figure out how to reclaim his home. Attempts to serve Tuna with legal notices were repeatedly undermined. Each time she failed to appear in court, the judge dismissed the case, citing technicalities. Meanwhile, Tuna and her accomplices trashed Dan's property, barricaded doors, and even vandalized his possessions. As the months dragged on, Dan's life unraveled. His van was repeatedly impounded, he fell into homelessness, and his health deteriorated. Once, after being released from jail, Dan was found unconscious in a ditch with multiple severe injuries, including a broken femur, hip, and spine. He was hospitalized and barely survived. Despite everything, he refused to give up. A pro bono lawyer finally provided some hope. Using the original 3-day eviction notice as a basis, they fought for months to secure a court order. Meanwhile, Tuna continued to exploit every delay, leaving Dan's home in worse condition each day. By December, the eviction was finally scheduled with the police and a friend, Paul, at his side. Dan watched as Tuna was forced out. She grabbed her purse, dog, and left behind a house filled with mountains of trash, vandalized property, and malicious booby traps. The extent of the destruction was staggering. Trash, tons of garbage in the yard, including an 8 by 8 by 12-foot pillar of wire fencing filled with waste. Vandalism. Crushed glass embedded in the driveway, dog urine-soaked carpets, and clogged sewer pipes filled with dirt and plastic. Dan's home was a shell of what it had been, but he refused to let Tuna's actions break him. With the help of friends and family, he began the slow process of rebuilding. Tools were replaced and the house cleaned. The financial and emotional toll was immense, but Dan's resilience shone through. Ironically, a year later, Tuna ended up in prison without finding anyone willing to take her in. Dan's story is a testament to the power of perseverance and the unbreakable bond of family. Despite the horrors inflicted upon him, Dan reclaimed his home and started piecing his life back together one step at a time. What the heck was that person thinking by recommending that crazy woman to stay in his house? Always get a tenancy agreement. Never rent to people without gold references from multiple places. Squatters' rights should never exist. This is wrong on so many levels, and it infuriates me that this happens. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.